This book is it's a story about an epic biography of the greatest humanitarian you've never heard of. And that's the whole point, because he's only known before this book to an inside culture of State Department and United States Agency for International Development workers, essentially, and to some people in the CIA, the National Security Council. People inside Washington know all about him, but to a larger group, even to the human rights community in New York, they've probably never heard of him, or if they have, it's just been very incidental, and for one thing or another. It was a story too good to refuse to tell, essentially. And I, in fact, interrupted another book in order to break away and spend 3 years on this. Imagine someone from a wealthy Jewish family in Manhattan of Holocaust refugees. His father did very well in business in the commodity trade, who nevertheless not only did not go to college, but did not graduate high school because he had a very mild reading learning disability that has since been cured, essentially, but which made it impossible for him to study in the usual, in the usual way. And so what did he do? He went into the commodity trade like his father, which becomes very crucial later on during his humanitarian work, and then joins the army, volunteers to go to Vietnam, and is awarded a Bronze Star for service in Vietnam. Think of this. It's a kid from Manhattan, drops out of high school, wins a Bronze Star in Vietnam. And then after that, to make a long story short, he got his start doing refugee work during the Great Guatemalan earthquake of the mid-late 1970s, was discovered by USAID. And even though he didn't even have a high school education, he began a career that would last over 40 years working for the State Department and USAID in one conflict and disaster zone in the developing world after another. We talk about storied great foreign correspondents who may have covered most wars and who may have interviewed dozens upon dozens in each place. Here's the story who is someone who is not specifically a reporter, but basically that's what he did, who is in literally everywhere, every foreign war and disaster area, and interviewed not dozens, but hundreds in each place, and brought back his analytical reports to USAID, to the State Department, and consequently made foreign policy a bit smarter and a bit more humane, sometimes dramatically so. A few examples of the kinds of things he accomplished. In 1984, he discovered a mass murder in central Uganda in a region called the Luwero Triangle. And he brought the news back to Washington. And the result was that it led to the collapse of the murderous regime of Milton Obote, who succeeded Idi Amin, and it brought to power someone who at the time, 35 years ago, was a beacon of light, Yoweri Museveni, who was educated, who had a disciplined army, did not loot when they took over towns, and also improved the standing of the United States in East Africa. It would become a theme of Gersony. If you do the right thing in a humanitarian sense, you improve the American strategic and geopolitical position. In Mozambique, a few years later, Southern Africa during the, in the late 80s, was a maelstrom of war. There was massive, epic cinematic war in Angola, in Mozambique. The Portuguese Empire had collapsed, and both East and West forces were fighting over the carcass of the empire. And the Reagan administration was all ready to anoint the Renamo guerrillas in Mozambique as recipients of military aid under the Reagan doctrine. Gersony shows up in his typical fashion, interviews hundreds of refugees all along the 1,500-mile border of Mozambique, from South Africa in the south to near Tanzania in the north, and then all through Mozambique in the heart of the country, and comes back and said, Renamo are a bunch of murderers and rapists. They have no political plan whatsoever. Even though we're supporting another anti-communist guerrilla group in Angola, Renamo in Mozambique is nothing like the group we're supporting in Angola. Result, Gersony comes home, briefs George Shultz in his office with Maureen Reagan. Very common for Gersony to come back from sleeping in a sleeping bag in the field for weeks and weeks and briefing high policymakers. Shultz goes to Reagan. Renamo is cut out of the Reagan doctrine. And the result of that is that the Mozambique Civil War starts to wind down, saving hundreds of thousands of lives as a result of one man going around just asking peasants and refugees what happened to them, and putting it through his commodity trader slash accountant slash math mind analytical filter. Bob Gersony was not enraptured by causes. He was not a liberal arts major. He was very much a math mind with an interest in commodity prices of agriculture, goods that peasants, the lifeblood of peasants who he spent his life in the developing world.